Welcome to another Under the Influence podcast, proudly sponsored by the Together Store. Today we are under the influence of Colin Bell as we talk about all things safari, wine and conservation, past, present and future. What a privilege to talk to this visionary of the safari industry. Enjoy. Colin Bell, welcome to the Under the Influence podcast and to our Secret Cellar studio. I must admit, it's a really great honor to have you here. I grew up wanting to be a game ranger, and instead I somehow managed to get into wine and then visit some of these incredible properties that you founded over your career. Did you ever have any interest in wine growing up, or?
No, we knew nothing about wine. Absolutely. So when we started safaris, it was, in fact, I was just one of the lucky ones. I ended up graduating finishing my last year at university was 1976. And 1976 was the traumatic year. I was a Wits student. And we ended up sort of watching this whole country start burning. And you think that fees must fall and all that was hectic. I mean, that 76 was the worst. And you could feel the tension, and all my mates were being arrested and stuff like that. So I made the conscious decision, let's go and work somewhere else. But I didn't want to go overseas. So I ended up with two job offers. One which is go and work in Namibia as a geologist, and the other one was to go and work in Botswana as a safari guide. Both had their head offices in Main Street in Johannesburg. So, and I went from job interview to job interview, up and down and up and down. And I literally, both were exciting. So I spun a coin.
You serious?
It was one of those lucky decisions in life. And spun a coin, and it said Botswana guide. So April of 1977, I started working as a safari guide. And we were in Series 3 Land Rovers with a trailer on the back and everything packed on the roof, and off you'd go for 2 or 3 weeks. And my first safari to Botswana. So as a kid, we lived in the Northwest Cape. And so I got a real passion for the bush as kids. So we used to just go out of our back door and we'd be in the bush.
Yeah.
And we would be after bees and honey and you name it, whatever. And so I had an idea of what happened, but never on a safari. So on my very first safari, the boss sends me the keys and he said, right, you're going off in 2 days' time, go and pack your Land Rover. And he made me write on the inside of my left arm, because it had to be the left arm, because he had 1, 2 people, the 9 and the little 8 plus me. And I knew when I got to 45, and it said L, 45 kilometers left. And that is my first safari. I pitched up in Mound.
Turn left at the termite mound.
I found my way to Crocodile Camp. There the guys helped me through and they got me to the next places and all the rest of it. But on those days, we used to go and buy 25 litres of Dassenberg. And the worst thing about it was a lovely amount of wine. We knew nothing, but we knew we had to drink it and have fun around the campfire, etc., etc. But the 25 litres was in a black plastic container. Drum.
Basically a solar panel.
Exactly, on the roof. And you go around for 3 weeks with this every night going down a touch and wondering why, and the next morning we had headaches. It was just that was the norm.
Yeah.
And so that was my introduction to wine, was headaches.
Yeah.
Because the wine was cheap, it was cheerful, and it cooked.
It was literally cooking on the top of the vehicle.
We had glue wine almost every night. So we used to be able to cool down the beers. We had long socks and chuck the beers down there and let the evaporative cooling sort of chill them down a fraction. So around midday you could have reasonably temperatured beers. But the wine, it was glue wine every night, and headaches the next morning, every morning, even doesn't matter what time you got up. But it was a fantastic way to start off. And
this is just mobile safari. So
mobile safari,
taking guests, mainly from South Africa or around?
No, overseas.
Really?
Mainly around the world. It was an interesting patch where we literally, for a couple of $100 in those days, people could book on a safari and everything is included for 2 or 3 weeks, and off you went.
And heading into the Delta?
Into the Delta, all the way through Moremi, Chobe, and the war was on between the Rhodesia of that era and the rest of the world. So we used to go as far as Kazangula and then have to head down towards Nata and back home again. But often we'd run out of fuel, because you'd get through to Kasane and you'd need to fill up.
Yeah.
And often there's only one fuel station, that is at Kazangula, just outside. And often you get there's no fuel. So then the excitement came because you'd then have to go across to Vic Falls.
Wow.
And you'd go and you arrive at the border post and all these guys with fresh white uniforms, and they made you so welcoming because they never had tourists in those war years. So we used to sneak in. I must say, everybody used to go down on the Land Rovers like this, and you'd to peer over the dashboard and just sort of hope like hell you didn't get shot. And you get into Vic Falls and you pull into the Vic Falls Hotel, and Pim's number 1 on the veranda. It was just the greatest.
And apparently the Vic Falls Hotel, it's just one of my favorite places, and we worked with them for a long time. But they almost had sandbags like up because they had a few shells that came over every now and then.
That was more Elephant Hills.
Okay. Oh wow, that's
Elephant Hills. And then on one day we drove in, everybody was grumpy. You could see there was a cloud over everybody, and all the people you knew, how's it. And this particular day, it was just gloomy, full up everywhere. And that was the day a rocket came over, heat-seeking missile. They tried to shoot the plane.
Oh, wow.
They had this flight of the angels. They had this ancient Aztec aeroplane which used to fly around
over the falls, yeah.
The original flight of the angels. And they tried to shoot this thing, and it missed. And it picked up the roof of the Elephant Hills, and that was the next bit of heat.
Wow.
And the Elephant Hills got shot and bombed.
Wow.
It was just, and then we had to sneak back into Botswana. My goodness, not only were we, it was just, our hearts were pumping that entire drive. Got back in, and then we head down towards Nata.
But Colin,
that's right, I haven't thought about this for a long time. So we just got into Botswana, and we're now driving towards Nata, and this is a terrible road, and we're driving along, and suddenly, wow! We got war on our minds, and we last people want to be involved in war. Wow! And I'd had a blowout. The tyre went, and it made often a blowout.
Yeah. This is a proper,
day,
like a landmine going off.
Yeah, exactly. We de-bailed out of this thing. Everybody scattered into the bushes. It was the tyre. And everybody, where's the blood?
But I mean, I can imagine at that age. I mean, this is the ultimate thing to do at that age. I mean, you studied finance, and suddenly you in the middle of the bush guiding guests. How did you jump from that to actually like starting your own business in Botswana? There must have been quite a few sort of overheated tanks of wine and missions before that started to crystallize.
Well, we actually were very loyal to our boss, but I always maintain in life you've got to work for a mean, nasty boss.
Okay.
And my boss was Mr. Tight, mean and nasty. And it was a very good lesson because it teach you how not to behave.
Yeah.
But we loved the life.
Yeah.
We were 23, 24, 25, and we worked from 77. I met Chris McIntyre, my partner.
Yes.
So I met him. He arrived. He left New Zealand as a 17-year-old boy, went to Australia, hated it. Then he came to Africa, and the only place which would take him was Rhodesia, the Rhodesia of that era. And he ended up lying about his age to go and work in parks. He always wanted to have animals. And you had to be 18 years old, so he lied about his age. And they sent him straight down to Karoi and Mana Pools. So he had a proper war all around him.
Yeah.
This New Zealand kid, never seen, played rugby, that's about it. That's about the most violent you'd ever get. Suddenly he's in the war zone, and he did about 9 months there, and he said, no. And then he came and joined the same company. So we ended up guiding together and getting to know each other. And the one great thing about working in tough conditions, you really start to learn who you can trust and who you can't.
Yes.
And that's one of the best things we ever learned. Always try and be in difficult situations with key people.
Yeah.
Because then you can see how they react later on in life.
Yeah.
So we had this fantastic relationship, and we were loyal to our boss, even though he's a mean bastard. He ended up, I remember, you go away for 3 weeks and you work your butt off, and you come back, the Land Rover's shot, you got to go and put new springs on, you got to fix everything and all the rest of it, and then you go again. And I remember I had to phone the local springs guys to get a brand new set of springs and all that type of stuff. And I made the phone call from, in those days, no cell phones, and I got back off my next safari, and there was a bill in my little locker, 19 cents for a phone call.
Off your pay.
Yeah, exactly. And we were getting no pay. 19 cents. But I learned that you've got to work for these kind of guys.
Yeah.
And so then you could see the war, Rhodesia, Zambia had already gone independent and stuff like that, and we were in Botswana. So Botswana has always been in since 66, and even before that, it was protected. It wasn't like a really heavy colonial country.
Yeah.
And the story there was that we'd watched what was happening, the sort of Macmillan's winds of change.
Yes.
And you could see the changes coming through Africa. And here was the South African company using Botswana as its resource base. And the business was coming to South Africa. The money was being paid to South Africa.
Most of the staff, yeah.
And there we are. We were all South Africans. And we used to pay... We used to fill up as much as we can with our fuel in South Africa. Food was all in South Africa. And we used to pay 2 pula a night, park fees. So that's R2.50 in today's money. Park fees per night. So the country was getting zero. And we saw the winds of change were coming through on every level, in politics, on even tourism. So we'd go there and they'd know we were South Africans. So we went to our boss and we said to him, this is in 82, we said, we're prepared to go and set up the Botswana office for you. We will go and give you a 5-year contract. At this stage now, we were really earning good money. We were up to 750 Rand a month.
Come on.
And we said, we'll give you a 5-year contract, and all we want is a CPIX increase.
Yeah.
And we'll do everything for you. And then you fly your guests in. It's a Botswana company. They'll pay Botswana tax, employ Botswana people, etc., etc. And our mean, nasty boss said, Botswana's had its day.
Wow.
It's finished. It's had the glory days. I will never invest in Botswana. We said, but you got it. This is the Okavango Delta. You're going to marine Chobe. You've got to employ people. Otherwise, your company's got no future. We said, I'll never do it. And Botswana's gone. So, and eventually we said to him, Alan, we have to go and do it. And if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it. And he threw out this challenge. He said, you'll never do it. And if you do, you'll fail. There's one thing to say to Chris McIntyre. That you're going to fail. I mean, that guy's got a backbone second to none.
Yeah.
My goodness. And our eyes lit up with the challenge.
Amazing.
And so we said, one more chance. Alan, we're going to set up this business. And he said, no. And what he'd done is worked with the whole of Botswana government to make sure we were bombed and stuff like that. And anyway, we gave him a resignation. In 83, we started our business.
Incredible.
And it was remarkable. I'd saved up 2,500 Rand.
Okay.
Chris had saved up 2,500 Rand.
So it's like 3.5 months' salary, basically, that you'd
We'd saved up. And we started this business with that. That's all we had. But I say, we were always lucky.
Yeah.
Coming out of university, flipping the right side, just having the best luck, best people, and having the best guide in Africa. And I still maintain that Chris is probably the best guide who's ever worked in Africa. Yeah. And there's some great guides. I mean, that's a hell of a statement to say that. I mean, he could take an 80-year-old, an 18-year-old, and an 18-month-old. Yeah. And they would all have the most fantastic time.
That's the secret to guiding.
He was just and brave and funny. I mean, he used to tell these jokes around the campfire. And 20 minutes into the same joke, everybody's on the floor, sore stomachs, laughing like crazy. There's dust everywhere because we're just rolling around with mirth. And he'd often forget the punchline because the story would have so many different... So eventually he wrote in his cap, there's sort of 5 key punchlines. And these stories used to go on all night and then he'd be the first up in the morning. Yeah. And in those days he could drink 30 bottles of beer a day and never get drunk. Today you meet him and he's 60-something. Yeah. And he's the toughest, strongest 60-year-old I've ever met. And he's up 4 o'clock every morning. He's cycling like crazy. He's got all these elephant paths. He still lives in Mount. Got these elephant routes he follows with on his mountain bike. And you say, Chris, you want a beer? Tea, please.
He had his allocation of beer.
Exactly. He's done everything, and he's got such a great attitude to life. And one of the things I learned is you've got to have great partners. Yeah. And then we were very lucky. We got into all sorts of niches. We started bird watching safaris. Wow. We had Ken Newman, Peter Steyn, Jeff Lockwood, and all these great birders come in. And we'd have these, and Bob Scholes and botanical safaris. We really started on specialist safaris. And the first one we ran, I'll never forget, it was 999 Rand, including flights from Johannesburg. A week in the Okavango Delta, 3 different areas with Ken Newman or whoever. Yeah. And Chris and I would be we had been two different areas. He had been one part of the Delta, I'd been the other, and the guests used to come through with Peter Stain or Ken Newman, and then we used to flick over. And
Pels fishing out. I mean, that's what people come in, yeah.
Absolutely. And so and the first trip we put out at 909, including flights, everything, and drinks.
And drinks, yeah.
And we had a waiting list of about 50.
Yeah.
We suddenly realized, wow, we've got a business.
Yeah.
Alan Simpson, here we come.
Yeah.
My mate, we're taking you on. And he was still doing the old camping trips, and within 9 months of us starting, he sold.
But that insatiable demand that you don't know you have until you spend time in the wilderness. You know, once you've spent time as a human being in a wilderness area, like the Okavango Delta, you physically yearn to go back.
Oh, completely. And the more you're there, the more you want to be there.
Yeah.
We never viewed our job as a job.
No.
It was just the most fantastic time of our life. We knew nothing. But Botswana was mainly hunting areas, and we made arrangements. We were able to get private areas, and I mean, Chris was the nicest, funniest guy, and people would just say, yeah, listen, come camp here, come do this, and off we went. And the business just grew, and we brought in some fantastic guides. Same story, watched them carefully, and the ones who really did well under pressure, those are the guys. And then we started the businesses with them. We then set up a Namibian business, a Zimbabwe business, a Malawi business, all with these guys.
Yeah.
And all of us had worked through as guides. And then business was second. We always said, listen, if you do things the best, if you focus on this experience and do these things right. But also, we had gone along and we'd created the best vehicles.
Yes.
And we were able to buy a whole lot of military vehicles.
Really? Like Unimogs or like...
Well, they had these Ford Control Land Rovers. Now, you remember these little Land Rovers, 9 people in the seat, all like this with a hot bloody wine there. And then we bought these kind of office ambulances. And we could cut out the sides, and we had a fridge, we had a library. We could have a library, and you could walk around the back, and you had a fridge suddenly. You know, that we weren't having this good wine. Yeah. And so wine, we suddenly, oh my goodness, we keep it refrigerated, it actually tastes better.
Tastes better, yeah.
Yeah, and it was one of these magic kind of changes. And every morning you wake up on safari, and there were 2 things. And you knew if you're going to have a good day or a bad day, because the fridges were so temperamental. And so the first thing you look is your punctures. No punctures. The next thing you sneak over to your fridge, because the hyenas were always trying to get in, and all the rest of it, and the little pilot lights, you go up and you go, and if it is cold, you mean, great day.
Cold beer. Tired, yeah.
And that's how it sort of developed over time, and we were able to, as we expanded to new countries, still with no cash, everything we earned.
Everything went back in,
But then we started to understand that to get private areas, we had to partner with local people. And it became an absolute revelation. And it started in Namibia, where we started this whole partnering story.
Was that mainly in the Tomorrowland area? I mean, that's one of the most incredible pioneering stories in terms of connecting communities to conservation.
Yeah, it is, and there was Garth Owen Smith and Margie Jacobson, and they were our mentors. They really, because they saw the vision, and they asked lots of people to get involved. And I remember they approached us, and they said, "Listen, this is a great area," and we kind of, what's in there? It's lots of people and goats. You know, our stuff is wildlife.
Yes.
And eventually, our Namibian GM, a guy called Peter Ward, he said, "Colin, you've got to come. This is a great area." And we drove in, it was November, and we're going to go and meet the local chief.
In November.
45
pretty
degrees. 45 degrees. In we go, and we go to this particular spot we had to meet him. It was under a little shepherd's bush tree, where there's Boskia trunkers. And, you know, they got like this, and they have about this much shade. And Peter Ward is a big guy. So we get to the spot we had to meet the chief, and Peter sits down in the shed. I'm trying to find my little corner, and there's nothing. Peter gobbled up
one sunburned arm.
Yeah, we're sweating. And all the way in, we'd seen goats, not one wildlife, not one animal which was alive. And Peter said, no, it's going to be a great area. But what we had seen is an elephant footprint. And that elephant footprint was, okay. So the chief came up, and I remember he came on his cake cart with the wheels go good, and this old donkey, and it's just such a pitiful sight. And his entire village, not one person had ever had a job. Not one person. They were the rinfasmakers. They were thrown out of Uppington generations before, dumped there. Not one person in his entire community ever had a formal job. So when we came along and we said, listen, we'd like to see what we can do, we weren't optimistic because people want to see wildlife. But I kept remembering, that elephant footprint. And so we struck up a deal. We said, okay, give us a chunk of land, we'll see what we could do. And we didn't want to spend any money because we didn't have cash, but we also didn't want to risk cash by setting up a camp. But we said, we'll bring some camping safaris through. And they do the whole of Namibia, these camping safaris, Tosha, and the most wonderful places and experiences. And you get the guest report at the end, best of all, Tomorrowland. But there's nothing there. Another one, Tomorrowland. It was just, and we said, wow. So then we went and bought some 3 meter by 3 meter dome tents. I said, okay, we're going to invest heavily. Chuck the dome tents in there, and started employing people permanently now. And same story, on a safari, best Tomorrowland in a dome tent. And it just grew and grew. And eventually we put these Marys in there, and then we had ensuite facilities. Yeah. Wow, we went to luxury safaris. And it was, that camp in a very short space of time was completely run by the local folks.
Yeah.
Completely and absolutely run 100%. So we'd go in every so often and just mentor them, pep them up.
Yeah.
But they understood, and the deal we struck with them is they would get 10% of turnover.
Yeah.
We didn't have to pay anything on a base level, which is, in hindsight, the mistake we made. And we were learning. We didn't understand. 10% is very high.
Yes.
And this is 10% of turnover, not profit.
Yeah.
And 10% of turnover on an average year is about
100% of profit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it had to have a super year to make some money.
Yeah.
So what we did is we changed that over time, and we said, okay, we will, not for them, but all our deals.
Yes.
We like to have a base rental.
Yeah.
So the community get cash regardless.
Yes.
Even COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got one of our concessions in the Okavango with natural selections is we pay 3.6 million pula. That's 4.5 million rand on the 1st of January.
No matter what.
No matter what. This community got their money. In fact, I think we paid 3 times a year. This community got all their cash, even though we, from March, not a sausage. Yeah. And that's a great thing because it keeps them on site. Yeah. So we've had, we were doing snare checks and all the rest of it, found no snares.
Yeah. Because it's a parallel incentive, there's alignment. I mean,
total alignment.
I think, there are few. I'm very fortunate to travel to some of these places that you've created over the years, and one of the few places where my wife Nix literally cried when we left was Tomorrow. We'll link to the Tomorrowland, but the Desert Rhino Camp.
Desert Rhino, exactly.
I mean, that, and it's the staff are just so incredible, and and you feel that sense of ownership because it is.
And it's an interesting thing that Tomorrowland started with just nothing. And then it blossomed. Today, something like 30-35% of all of Namibia is set aside
on that model,
on these, on the foundation of that elephant footprint.
Yeah,
it's really remarkable how it's just grown.
And I think there's been some research done to replicate it in other regions like Tanzania and Kenya, because there's also quite a lot of wildlife, human kind of interaction and conflict.
So what happened in East Africa is they kind of all developed their own models.
Yes.
And everybody this is all new.
Yeah.
And the Kenyan model, which really was a shocker, was that the local safari companies went to the communities and said, I'll pay you $45 US every time I have a tourist sleeping in a bed.
Oh, so it's like a bed night rate.
It was a bed night. And the local Maasai, 45, okay, it's got 16 beds, 50% occupancy, ching. And the good years, it was amazing because they got lots and lots of money. And you take that 45 US and convert it to Kenyan shillings. It was remarkable. And then after these successive years of good payments, your lifestyle changes. Your kids go to better school. You now got all these things. And then what happens? Suddenly there's a bad year. And suddenly, wow, how do I maintain my lifestyle?
Yeah.
So the model of having a base rental and a percentage of turnover is the right one.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Kenyans went way over
Yeah.
the side, no base, and a country which fluctuates like
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
One little incident
Yeah.
and the tourism go to zero.
Yeah.
A couple of years where no incidents, the tourism go through the roof.
Yeah.
And as a result of not having guaranteed income, the communities then started planting wheat in the Masai Mara. Simple, because they would rather have income that they could rely on
Yeah.
versus this erratic
Yeah.
up and down. Up
And a
and down.
lot more cattle, a lot more goats, and
And that's the thing. So what we ended up doing is, the Namibian model started. We lobbied behind the scenes in Botswana, and we got them to move away from the mass tourism model.
Yes.
A guy called David Hartley and myself, we went behind the scenes, and David had a partner called will come to me now. And he was very well connected. He was a hand-chosen guy by Seretse Kwame, and they sent him overseas to go and get educated. And he was one of these backbone guys in government. And he was a partner in David's in Kugana Lodge. And we went behind the scenes, and we lobbied over a period of a year. Guys, this is what's happening. You're earning 2 pula per person. All the South Africans, Zimbabweans, Namibians coming and testing their 4x4s and not paying money and not creating jobs. They're bringing their own fuel in. I mean, there was this migration out of the northern Botswana into Gaborone and Francistown. The only time they've really had a kind of a squatter problem is at that period, because there were no jobs. Everything was cheap and more cheap.
yeah.
And then we heard nothing about the Botswana policy. And then suddenly, about a year later, out it came. Guys, we've got a new tourism policy we're going to experiment with. We're going to switch out of mass tourism. We're going to go for very selective, high tariff, low volume. And they dreamt it up themselves. It was remarkable how these folks behind the scenes, Botswana's always been a bit slow to catch on, but they were world leaders on this one.
Yeah.
Walked on, we provided the inspiration, but they'd taken that thing and said, right, boom. And they carved up the country into these concessions, they leased them all out at a lot of money, and now the private sector had to go and put in airfields, have to go and put in tracks, and had to invest in the lodges. But they took a guaranteed lease fee, and the model then is, it depends where you are, it's between 4.5% and 6% of turnover, which is about the right balance. And the tourism industry just took off. So it's one of these things. So we were behind the scenes, but we were also ready for when this thing took off.
Amazing.
And we still didn't have the money to go and tender for these. So we made side deals with all the guys with concessions, and then eventually we were able to go and tender for the leases ourselves, or even go and buy leases.
Incredible. So, Colin, just going from the community involvement, which has been absolutely crucial to the success of all your projects. You were going into these amazing areas. You were starting to buy or lease concessions. What was your first camp? I mean, that must have been an interesting journey to actually put foundations down and build something in the middle of nowhere.
So the foundations of the permanent camp started at Tomorrowland, because we were, that really started the process, but it was a very cautious process.
Yes.
So our very first camp we built was also with a guide we'd worked with at our previous company, a guy called Henny Rawlinson. And Henny is this wonderful, funny old character. I know you've probably met Henny.
He's still in Bots. He's still got properties.
He's a Botswana citizen.
Yeah.
He's, so Henny, we could see, he ran fantastic safaris. And so we approached him and said, Henny, would you like to be a camp owner? And so we had a discussion, because we'd been doing mobiles out of Kidra. And the opportunity came up to go and build a permanent camp there. And so we struck a deal with Henny. He said 50-50. You take 50, we take 50. And the total cost of the camp was 12,500 pula.
Slightly different to the recent work done.
Wow, that's $40 million. Same side. 12,500 pula. And that was everything. So what we got, and we'd done our deal with the local Bayi. We had been doing Makoro safaris for a long time. There's a wonderful old man called Sarako, who really was, and Ish and Sarako were just the rock of our business. And I learned more bushcraft from anybody from those two. And Ish was this massive, massive guy. If you wanted to have a charging buffalo in front of you, you wanted Ish in front of you. And he's just solid. Sadly, he passed on. But he got gored by a buffalo, and Sarako also. And these guys were absolutely petrified of buffalo. But on their makoros and their walking, they knew exactly what to
Yeah.
do. And their bushcraft was amazing. So we did a deal with them and said, right, arrive on Kijra on this particular day, whatever it is in March. And sure as nuts, and we got there on that day, and boy, they were there, all waiting for us.
And did you have a couple of poles and some canvas and away you go?
Well, we took some reeds.
Yeah.
It was outside the Maremi at that stage, it's now inside the Maremi. We've got some reeds, and we put a canvas over the top, and we made a couple of hinges, and we made some little rustic swing door. And that was it, 12,500 pula. At the end of the year, we had something like 30,000 pula in the bank.
Wow.
It was remarkable. And so we sat down with Henny and said, right, okay, we've also got insurance, and we've got this and that. And he said, what? No, there's 30 in the bank, half's for me. Boom! But, what we said, Henny, it's not the way business works, but he'd done such an amazing job. Yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is when you don't count the money in somebody else's pocket.
Yeah.
It's the best thing you can do. And yes, we should have put insurance and all that, but you know what? It didn't matter. And because we didn't count the money in somebody else's pockets, we never ever got bitter. We never got... And so he ran the show so well. And it was always a fun evening. And he just had the greatest sort of character to run a lodge. And also with working with Bai. Sometimes these Afrikaans families have got an incredible way of dealing with black people, and they just connected so well. So he got the most out of them, and we got the most excitement. I mean, our walking and makoros were amazing, and that's why we had money in the bank at the end of it.
Yeah.
So that was the first one, and then and you say, look at Kijra today, 40 million US. Not Pula, 40 million US.
It's on the cover of Visi magazine this month.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that, okay. So it's gone from that. And it's got a whole lot of steps in amongst that.
Yeah.
Over time, as we got some more cash, we kind of knew we had some ropey bits, which we kind of were able to smooth over. And it built and built and built. And Henny ended up going for the lease when our original lease ran out, and he got it, and we worked comfortably with him, and we built these partnerships with these wonderful people. And Kijra was one, and then there was a problem. Oh, that's right. There was the hunting company which we'd done a deal got bought by some other oaks, and we got tossed out of there. They said, no, we're going to hunt there. And they said to us, but in compensation, we'll give you Jadibi, which is on the top of the delta. So we had Jadibi. And now, for going from Kijra, which had everything, Jadibi is just papyrus and papyrus and papyrus, and the fish eagle
and the crop under the papyrus.
Yeah, that's it. And it was so we struggled, and we knew we had to have a land camp, but we were so busy. And this is the problem. You start your season, you're doing your mobiles, you're doing this and that, and we were offered Mombo 4 times. And you believe 4 times, and every time we turned it down, I said, too busy. I've got a safari starting tomorrow, so I can't do it. And so the next year we were offered again and offered. Eventually I said, okay, let's go and have a look. So I took some mates up at Christmas.
Oh my gosh.
And we went in there and we were given this really old Land Cruiser. And I had all my mates in the back, including one little baby like this from one of my mates. And off we went. And we jumped into this open cruiser. We had the tracker with me, going to show me the way to Mombo. I've never been there in my life. And we head out of Mount Airport. And I get to the T-junction to turn left to go north, put my foot on the brake, straight into the Safari South fence. There was no brakes. This vehicle had given me that
what
guy
who was running.
Right in there. This is the owner of Mombo. He's desperate to sell me the whole place. Anyway, so can you imagine bouncing around all the way to Mombo with no brakes? Every time bump, nothing. And this poor kid at the back, bounce. We arrived there, we were finished, but as we got towards Mombo, we just saw, wow, this place
incredible.
is just pumping with wildlife.
And it was a hunting concession at the time, yeah?
It was but they'd actually moved away from it. They realised that actually there's too much value. There's no question in a prime area, photographics kills hunting
of course.
50 times over.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what anybody tells you. I mean, I've got all the numbers. It's only in the most marginal area that hunting can justify itself. So that's why the whole of the Delta today is no hunting.
Yeah.
Even though they're now allowed to hunt in Botswana, there's no hunting in the Delta because everything was all around economics. And the economics and the job creation and the money, etc., etc. These concessions could never survive on the revenue of hunting, no matter what the hunters will say. And so hunting has kind of become the only time you can really justify it now is when it's the economic opportunity of the last resort.
Yeah.
and then you can maybe stack it up. But yeah, we went into Mamba, and then suddenly we had...
And there was nothing there. Or was there a basic camp?
Oh my goodness, if I showed you photographs. It was sold to me as the most luxury lodge in the whole of Botswana. It was on the par with Mala Mala and Andalazi. And so we were going jing, and I've got a photograph of when we arrived, and there was the swimming pool, this luxury swimming pool, and it was just literally a plastic thing with with the bricks around, and what's in the middle? A hippo.
I've seen that photograph. That is an absolute classic.
That is it. And some Meru tents, and that was it. It was appallingly run. And
that old Mambo is where they actually set up the fly camp, the temporary, when Mambo was being renovated, I believe.
So I heard the original Mambo was not where Mambo is today.
No.
And then we had Mambo Trails.
Yes, okay, yeah.
That was also in a different place. And then the lease ran out, and we had to re-tender. And one of the things about these stories is that you always have to, in a tender process, you have to impress the living daylights out of all your readers.
Yeah.
And the readers, at that stage, we had 20 invigilators of all the tenders. And they all came from local mountain villages. Now, to impress the tender panel, you've got to go and show the lights, and you've got to show all this type of stuff. And you have a tender document. It's got to pass the weight. If you don't pass the weight, then they think it's nothing. So we knew how to write tenders. We had these massive documents, and you covered everything from your sewage all the way through, and you had to show glitz and glamour. Otherwise you lose it. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why
things have escalated.
There's competition at tender time.
Yeah.
And Botswana was very fair. Once you had a tender, there was very few guys ever lost their concessions, because it was you had a valuable asset. You had to look after it. You had to make sure that the road network was done properly. You had to make sure your sewage was done properly. And over time, technology really aided us. And so generators were gotten rid of, and now it's all solar.
Solar,
and it's now legislation. You've got to have solar. You've got to have proper sewage systems and grey water systems and all the rest of it. And it's all part of making people taking ownership of these areas and putting good money in to make sure that they looked after. You're not polluting, you're not destroying, and best of all, you've got to make sure your communities are looked after. So you have all those relationships. Yeah, and so this industry sort of grew all out of about a year of consultation behind the scenes by a whole lot of very, very wise Botswana people who just got it.
I mean, Rwanda's now on the same model with that, high value, low volume, and it's just, I mean, you must sometimes look back on it all, and it must just feel like a blur, because it's so much has happened. I mean, you and your contemporaries created an industry and created an ecosystem of value, not just for wildlife, but also for local communities.
Well, that's the thing. The main thing now, it's not me. It was, we were just part of this extraordinary tide, but we saw that we had to really compete, and compete hard. And then in the 80s, when we started, there was so much bickering between different operators. And and quite often guests would go with this company for a bit and that company, and there would be all this sniping. And there was and that was when it was all about Tupula. And it took about, I think, probably the early 90s when the new tourism policy came through, and we suddenly realized what's going on. So we kind of, as an industry as a whole, everybody said, okay, let's market the destination, and then let's get people to be interested in Botswana, and then they would go and compete and see what product suited them best. So we all forgot about trying to market ourselves. We've marketed the country, and that switch, and everybody focusing on promoting Botswana, that really gave Botswana the impetus to grow as a destination. And then the more we grew the pie, there was more for everybody else. And then so many more people got involved. People started springing up. New companies started here, there, everywhere. I remember when we started our mobiles about 2-3 years, no, a little bit more, maybe 5 years after we started, this one guy with lots of money got involved with mobiles. And he had the best vehicles by a country mile, and he had the best equipment, much better than us. And we were really worried. In his first safari, he was chock-a-block full. He said, this guy just started, chock-a-block full.
New tents, how does he afford that?
Yeah, exactly. And then, but we'd been in the bush. We knew exactly what was going on. Now, this is in the era, in the 80s, and late 80s when hunting was still big. The elephants were being smacked. It was before the ivory ban of 89, 90.
So they were quite aggressive and
hugely aggressive. So we knew when you saw an elephant herd there that we had to go there. This guy didn't. He's on his first safari. He's picked them up in Mount Airport.
Let's go into this breeding herd. Let's see what's happening.
It goes through Southgate, jug, 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 smash. This bloody elephant came along and touched on both sides of his radiator, shook this vehicle for about 100 meters. Nobody died, thank goodness. Lots of people bruised. So his safari company lasted one day. He closed it that day.
And you look at, as you said earlier, the safari companies benefited so much from having guides founding them, because a guide can, host a guest, negotiate anything, because you have to negotiate as a guide, whether it's through a border crossing or whatever. So from a business perspective, that helps. But then just also like understanding guests and the community. I mean, the guides really, that's probably why we had a job. You guys needed some help on the wine side.
Exactly.
But it's amazing. I really enjoy at the trade shows, which we haven't attended for a while. Seeing that amazing group of individuals together. As you say, you are competitors, but you also work together.
We fully understood that you compete on the marketing and operations. You support each other.
Yeah.
That was because always brand Botswana came first.
Yeah.
And it took some time, but once you get that right, and sadly in South Africa we don't do enough of that.
Yeah.
I think COVID is going to make us come together, but we do so much counterproductive marketing against each other, and these sort of petty turf wars which exist in the wildlife industry and all the rest of it just never ever are good for the big picture.
Yeah.
And
ego doesn't do any good in those situations.
It's counterproductive for growing the pie.
Yeah.
When you have the attitude you've got to grow the pie, it's amazing how things can really grow.
Yeah.
But when you're sniping and you're bickering and no, this is my road, you can't go over, you can't shine a spotlight on that side, the stories where I'm coming from, and it's just counterproductive. So
I've been in the Sabi Sands where the guys park a vehicle like literally so that the other side of the road can't see the wild dogs. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah,
that's exactly, and we've got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
We've got to actually work much closer together. We've got to start doing that. I spent a bit of time on the board of South African Tourism, and it's one of the most frustrating periods of my life because you see the potential and how we're not touching potential. And there's so many things we just shoot ourselves in the foot. And you look at a country like Australia, and we were kind of semi-level pegging with them 20 years ago, and look at they got 9.4 million fly-in tourists.
I mean, into Australia, it is the arse end of nowhere.
Yeah, it's got a rock, a bridge, some nice food,
opera,
and they've got a dying Barrier Reef.
Yeah.
And they've got 9.4 million fly-in tourists. Official figures are about 2.5 fly-in, but a lot of people who come in, they go to Vic Falls and back again, they count it as 2. So our real number is probably about 1.8 fly-in tourists.
That's crazy.
1.8 million for all the culture.
Yeah.
And sitting on the tourism board, you just realize, gosh, we shoot ourselves in the foot. We do this canned lion hunting. What a terrible thing for brand South Africa.
Yeah.
And then this competitiveness between the different lodges and all these type of things. If we get together, we can do amazing things.
Grow the pie, as you say.
And that has to be the focus, especially if the lessons come out of COVID. We've got to all go shoulder to shoulder and focus on the big picture. And then I think we can do amazing stuff because we've got the product, we've got the people, we've got the culture, we've got the interest, we've got the wildlife, all these different things. Otherwise, everybody's going to take our cake. And look at Kenya now. They've done amazing stuff.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's, you look at Southern Africa, you look at Kenya, but there's you've had a few flips over certain parts of the northern Okavango Delta. I mean, there's all these new areas potentially, the sort of the size of Wales. I mean, it's going to take a lot of time. There's Ethiopia, there's South Sudan, there's Chad. I mean, the safari industry is also going to grow into these new areas.
Well, I hope you're right, because you've seen that map of Africa where you can put the whole of the US, plus the whole of China, plus the whole of India, plus the whole of Japan, plus the whole of Europe, plus the UK, and we've still got space. So if you think of all those countries, and we only have 5% of global tourism, 5%.
It's crazy.
And we got all this land, and we've got all these
I mean,
extraordinary
in a post-COVID world, do you go on a cruise ship or go and stay at the Trevi Fountain in Italy, or do you come to Africa? It's like a no-brainer.
That's it. So we have got such an opportunity, and we have to go and showcase that. But on everything, and the wines. I mean, our wines are now, as you know, I no longer get headaches from red wine.
Strange that.
We've got everything going for us, and we have to use COVID, because there is now we're seeing it now from overseas. The people who would normally go to Barcelona, Paris, or cruise ship, hang on, Africa's our opportunity. We have to now solidify it. And, wine's part of it. Our great food, our great chefs, our great everything. Just got to grab this opportunity and power ahead.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, because, I mean, you founded, as far as I can count, 3 successful safari businesses, maybe a few more. But you've kind of come full circle, in a way, back to the Cape. I know you were in the Northern Cape, and we're drinking a wine here from Elam, which is a wine that features on one of your newer projects, Okavango Beach Lodge. So you've gone from the bush to the beach.
Lovely.
And this is a wine that benefits from all that ancient sort of soil, which you actually see on the beach of Okavango. You see those like pebbles and that kind of like old shells from that ancient seabed. Tell me more about that project, Colin. I mean, you've had your eye on that sort of De Hoop beautiful area for quite a long time.
No, I was completely suckered in.
Okay. Bit of a hospital pass down the line.
This phone call is from the guy, and he's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And they worked out when De Hoop was tendered out. They tendered and they won the concession for the tourism opportunities, but there were quite a few opportunities in there, and they had their hands full, and they sold Okavango to us. Okay. I remember flying up the coast with Carl. He's a chopper pilot.
Yeah.
Flew us up there.
That's a good sales pitch, eh?
It was amazing. And there were all these whales. I mean, I'm going, wow! And then he sort of flicked over, and there was de Klerk's Camp David.
Yeah.
And it was there. And you kind of, wouldn't you like this? Wow, of course! So we bought it off him.
To come a long way since inspecting a new property with the Land Cruisers with no brakes.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, the last thing I was thinking we could ever go and build a lodge in De Hoop. But it's turned out to. So we knew about the de Klerk part and the kind of how it played an important part in the sort of formation of the new South Africa. A lot of the talks about Mandela happened there behind the scenes. A lot of the constitution discussions happened there. Mm-hmm. And it was a place where de Klerk could go away from the prying eyes, away from the press, and he could just be at peace, and then he'd invite people to come in and discuss with him. And he used that moment of sort of quiet diplomacy and intimacy with various people. And remember, these were troubled times.
Yeah. The country nearly tore itself apart.
Yeah, and he got them across to understand where we should be going. And a lot of it happened there. So we knew that. And then so we bought it and we built it and all the rest of it. In the meantime, there was a bushfire, and his old house burnt down. So we had to go and start again with new plans. And the more we started to find out what was going on, the more fascinating it got. And one of the things, we'd just been lucky all our lives. And one of the guys I was introduced to at a book fair, we'd just done a book on elephants of Africa. And at the same book fair was Craig Foster, my octopus teacher.
Yes.
And we got chatting, and we just hit it off. And the Foster brothers were well known in Botswana. They'd done really one of the best movies about the Sand Bushmen ever around.
Yeah.
And then they also did that movie of the crocodile lairs. And so, suddenly, and we suddenly at the same place, and we clicked. And turned out that Craig had done the curating for the museum in the centre of Cape Town, where they've got all these artifacts coming out of De Hoop and Blombos outside of it. And we started, the story's coming out. And Craig opened our eyes up to what was really happening. And there's this guy, Professor Henshelwood, who was raised at Blombos. His uncle owned the farm, and he got interested in archaeology. And then he went to Wits, became an archaeologist, became a professor, and they've now teamed up with Bergen University. And they've got something like 660 million euros to assemble the best science team in the world for a 10-year project to go and investigate what's happening in Blombos and at Klipdrift.
Wow.
Klipdrift is just down the road from us in the reserve, and Blombos just out. and the stuff they're unearthing. Now, it's always been assumed that the earliest sort of art, science and technologies come from Europe. You know, there's caves in France, caves in Spain, 40,000 years ago. You know, Africans were too stupid, nothing happened and all the rest of it. We had to go out of Africa to really find things. Well, and this is Thabo Mbeki's big story. I mean, he was really trying to drive the African agenda.
Renaissance,
And so Professor Henshelwood and his teams have done. It's just, and it's every month there's something new coming out. It's extraordinary. But clearly the first art, science and technology on the planet came from here.
Yeah.
Not from where we're sitting now, at Lakavat and that whole coast.
Yeah.
And so, and we have a gin bar in the evenings on the first guests when they first arrive. And we've changed the whole way of running lodges. You can't just pitch up any day. You've got to arrive on Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
And everybody comes together and they come with fresh eyes. And we go through the story. And Craig was amazing. So you've seen my octopus teacher, and he's got such a good way with explaining things. But he'd worked at the coalface and he understood this whole thing. And it turns out that every single person on this planet came from around about 300 to 500 breeding pairs of human beings living along this coast. All the I'm talking about us, not the hominids from a million years ago. I'm talking human beings, us.
Yeah.
Now, there's a cave in Morocco which collapsed, and there's a skull of 300,000 years ago, and then you've got the Ethiopian 175,000 years ago, and then there's nothing until 100,000 years ago. Africa got wiped out. All human beings got wiped out except for this little stretch of coast. There was no parasites, there was no malaria, the water was clear, and human beings could go for the first time and go and feed, it's like a mother and child could go and feed for themselves and get all the nutrients in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Which leaves 22 and a half hours for social stuff.
Yeah.
And
creativity
and they had all these micronutrients, so the brains developed. And that's the one thing which just baffles me is there's a particular rock, one of the schists, I think. If you heat it up to 300 degrees centigrade, nothing happens. You go to 350, and it changes composition. And you chip in a certain way, and you get these sharpest flakes.
Wow.
The first knives.
Yeah.
The first ochres. They got the first art on the planet from here. We all came from this chunk of land. Just round the corner where this is coming from. And our earliest ancestors, doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Mongoloid, American, or us living down here, we all have the same ancestors. And they would have walked right past where this wine's made.
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary to understand that how is it possible that we've gone everywhere from this little chunk of South Africa? So we're blessed. Same story with South Africa. We've got the hominid stories at the cradle of humankind, and we've got Homo sapiens down along the coastline of the Cape.
Well, I think, just sort of to wrap up the conversation, which has been an absolute pleasure. What I must commend you on over your career, which I've managed to be really privileged to engage with in a small way from our wine business and traveling and training. What I've noticed at Lakavat is this culmination of your experience and your purpose-driven approach to your life has gone into that property, where basically up on the wall, as you sit down to dinner, is that timeline from start to finish, in terms of nature and humans and human development, and how that's woven into the guest experience, into the food.
But hang on, I need to stop you there.
Yeah.
I need to say thank you to you, because we knew nothing about overbird wines. And one of the loveliest things is to drink wines from the area.
Yeah.
So we now have 12 house wines. People can choose whatever they want, all included in the price. And we have our little special ones on reserve. And if you had not got involved, and if you had not inspired our staff on the +1, we would never had the same story. And it's largely to you that I will say thank you.
Well, that's you put the wind into my sails and out of yours, Colin. But no, I mean, it's been a great privilege working with you, and I'm looking forward to all the projects ahead. And you really are an inspiration. And I just want to say, congrats on what you've achieved. But it's just the beginning. I'm looking forward to some missions to parts of Angola and who knows where with you. But just keep up the great work, and cheers to you.
Cheers. Well, we're building my last camp. This is my last one.
That's a lie.
At Mkombati along the Wild Coast. The only issue I'm thinking, what are our local wines that we're providing?
We can make some.
We're going to have to do something.
Yeah, we can get some good homemade beer up there.
Okay, lekker. Oh, craft stuff. That's
Exactly,
right,
exactly.
Thank you.
Cheers, Colin.
Cheers,
Thanks so
lovely.
much. Eh?
Pleasure.
Ciao.
Lekker.